Hello and welcome to another episode of CRT Sound System. My name is Tom, and I'm here as always with Reese. Reese, how are you?
I'm great. Welcome back from the lands between, known as Vermont.
I had a nice time in Vermont. Yeah, I always like to go to Vermont. Um, it's one of my favorite places in the world. But we're not here to talk about Vermont. We're here to talk about Ease 3, and we've got a guest with us. Scott, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Scott. Uh, yeah, I like East. I like East 3 a lot.
Excellent taste. That puts you in the top 0.1% of people with good taste. So
Oh, well,
congratulations.
that's good to know.
Hi, Scott. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I'm very excited to talk about the music of this game. It's phenomenal
It is,
Uh,
yeah.
so many
it
ways.
yeah. I have not played East 3. So I am excited to get into it. But we are East lovers here on the podcast, as you might see from our Discord server icon.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, and our previous episode on Ease 1, 2, and Origins as well. We definitely like to talk about Ease, but yeah, I suppose Scott, if you wanted to just give a brief introduction to the game itself. I know you're quite a bit more familiar with it than probably me and Reese are, so best that you tell the people about it.
Sure, yeah. So East 3 is the third game in the East series from Falcom. It was originally released on the PC 88, I think in 91, I want to say. Um,
That's about right.
yeah, it actually wasn't originally going to be an East game. They were just like um, messing around, working on stuff at Falcom, and we're
Hmm.
using an adult sprite just sort of as a placeholder. Um,
Okay.
and it went from there. And then it was originally after that was going to be a spin-off. And then
Hmm.
they decided to just make it a mainline entry into
And
the series.
is that why basically it ended up being a side-on game rather than top-down like the first two?
Yeah, that's why it's very very different. It was yeah, it originally started as it's entirely its own thing,
Hmm.
as they were as everyone was doing at the time, trying the Zelda 2 thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they were definitely they specifically cited Zelda 2, as
Hmm.
inspiration for sort of how they got started. But um, as different as the game is, it really does still feel very much like an East game. There's a lot of elements from the first two games that are sort of carried over. The
Hmm.
underlying mechanics still feel very much the same, even though
Yeah.
it's had a major perspective shift.
Yeah, definitely. Like even just things like how like combat feels, and then like even though it doesn't do the bump combat anymore, obviously, but the flow of the combat feels very similar, and even just things of how like you heal on the field, and things like that, which are sort of very what I would consider to be sort of very ease things that you don't see in many other types of games.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. The
yeah.
rings also, I think, from three are almost exactly the same as the rings
Oh
encounter
yeah.
from the first one. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of there's some definitely some through line there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and yeah, obviously the music then as well. Like it's uh, one of the best soundtracks in the series. I would say, like definitely in like the top three or four for me. And it's the one of the ones that I kept coming back to when I sort of discovered this series because as I often talk about, this is a series that never really reached Europe until sort of the mid 2000s, I would say, when the PSP releases started coming out.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, I think those are some of the ones like, and I think it was yeah, in fact, the remake of this was my first Ease game that I played. Now I was aware of the series, because if you're a nerd and you spend enough time online, you discover these.
Yeah, you're
Um,
gonna stumble onto a Falcon game at some
yeah,
point. It's inevitable.
yeah, but no, it was definitely one that once I discovered this series, I was like, all right, Ease 3 is the one that I'm going to be listening to a lot because the music in it is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
Trading Village of Redmont has been stuck in my head since I was 4. So
Yes.
Nice.
and
Yeah.
I still love it. So if that
Mm.
doesn't say it, then yeah.
Yeah, it's a very sort of classically jaunty sort of town theme for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely has, just as somebody gazing in from the outside from YouTube videos in the Basement Brothers unboxing, it still has like to me it looks incredibly different, of course. So I guess I don't have the same quite internal read on the vibes, but just in terms of like the art and the music, of course, and also like just the sweep of sort of like the graphics. It's definitely doing the Zelda 2 thing, but it's trying harder than Zelda 2 knew how. And I'm a Zelda 2 defender.
Same.
But
Oh yes,
it's
of course.
simply outclassing it. And it is the start of what I think the funniest franchise character of all time. I don't quite know why, but I think I love that every single one is about the Adol just going like, "Here we go again." um,
He's an
and so
adventurer.
yeah,
That's it.
I
He's
mean,
an adventurer.
it's the truest. I like to think every time there's a port, he's reliving every port as well. So
Well, that's weird. The games do actually have a like odd here and there continuity
Mm,
mhm.
carry through, but yeah, it's like it's he puts 100% emphasis on I am Adol and I am an adventurer and this is what I must do, and
yeah,
like that's it. That's all
just
he cares about.
compelled to adventure no matter what happens.
Yes.
100%. Just like, oh, we're gonna skip over the Dungeon Meshi Village and we're gonna do something else. He's so classically uh one of the pillars of those kind of characters in Japan.
Yeah. I think even the later games sort of do play around with that a bit. Like you definitely get a few gags about it in Ease 8, as I recall. It's
Mhm.
like uh, because you crash every time you go on a boat, that boat crashes. And there's like people on the boat will actually refer to that. Which is yeah, it's a fun series the
the,
way they do have a little bit of continuity, but there's really not that much between them.
Yeah.
yeah, the ninth game as well, if I remember correctly, when it starts out, it has like someone reciting like a list of Adol's crimes,
Oh, maybe it's the
um,
ninth game
which
actually. Yeah,
are like what's that?
it might actually be the ninth game rather than 8. Yeah, actually,
Oh
now
yeah, and yeah, the
yeah.
beginning of 9, yeah, it's like you get arrested and they're like reading a list of like Adol's crimes, and it's a bunch of stuff like from the other games.
So I think we'll jump into the first block of tracks anyway, and so the first selection I have here is all from the original PC-88 release. So the composer for that one is Meiko Ishikawa. Um, so I have Premonition Styx, Trading Town of Redmont, as you mentioned, Scott. Then I have Illburns Ruins, and some of these will come back later with different names, just because of the weird ways some of these are translated. So
Yeah.
I'm going to try and keep these consistent, but in case I get them wrong, just to note that. Then we have Be Careful, which is the Tigray Quarry track, and lastly I have Seal of Time, which is from Valestein Castle. was reading now about like all the different versions of this. Like Jesus, they're really
Yeah.
they were so busy in these early days and like getting so many different people to port their games. Like, because yeah, I
Oh
remember
yeah, there's this game got ported so many times.
I didn't even realize there was a PS2 port until just now.
Oh yeah, it didn't come over here or
Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah, it didn't look like it came outside of the West or outside of Japan, which would be fine anyway. It's not like you can. I feel like this is a game that's very easily playable
Oh yeah,
without tech,
yeah,
Mhm.
especially if you already know it.
yeah.
Because I have been debating getting the Switch version of Oath and Felghana that's out. That's currently in Japan only.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I've been playing it on my computer. Um, is it a new one or is it just the same one?
It's Oath and Felghana, but it's like it's got some extra um got like more high def versions of like sprites and
Oh, okay,
character portraits and stuff like that.
gotcha.
It's called
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Ease
I'm
Memoir.
playing it for the first time. Um, there's maybe a couple of times where you just be like, there's like something esoteric that you have to do to like advance, like that you have to do to trigger the story to advance or whatever. Like talk to everybody once in town or something. Um, but other than that, like I'm able to navigate around just based on like my memory of the 2D uh, dungeons and even like the world map.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you've played it before, it should be.
Yeah, it is interesting that they do sort of like even that version is quite similar in terms of structure to the original, even though it is just like a 3D.
Yeah, the biggest difference is that there's just like there's stuff in between the dungeons.
Hmm. I suppose just to go back to the music, the tracks from the PC-88 version, as Reese was saying, like they're just such like a classic sound to them. Um, they're like the trading town or trading village or Redmont track is just like such a quintessential town theme. Um, and like I love the Tigray Quarry one. It's just I love the way it starts off really slow and then just punches you in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It's. I think that's one of the reasons why. I mean, I love the TurboGrafx CD version. I mean, they're all great, but I think of the more modern ones, that's why I gravitate towards the Genesis one because I think it does a good job of mimicking the original sound chip. But and Yuzo Koshiro is pretty deft with the Genesis hardware.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's I think they're I mean yeah they're all great. It's nice going like the difference with the actual instrumentation and then going back to just hardware sounds. But I'm a sucker for the Genesis one for sure.
Yeah, I do like the Genesis one. Um, there's definitely a richness to the sound on it. I the Although I did see that it was Noriyuki Iwadare that did the Genesis arrangements.
Oh, maybe. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what
I get
I've
confused
seen. But
about who actually
yeah, again,
did
this is
which one.
there's like because there's so many different versions, so many like I think the original compositions are all done by Meiko Ishikawa, but like there's there like we always talk about it on here, just like especially with Falcom games, it's so hard to figure out, and they make it deliberate, I think.
Yeah,
um,
it's sadly something seemingly common among Japanese
yeah,
publishers. Sort of, it's just like it's from the studio itself. It's not from
yeah,
an
it's like it's the
individual.
house sound. It's not,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I think Falcom probably take it to a more extreme than others. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a problem. And I say when you have so many different versions, like once you get past the original composers, then you have all the arrangers who actually, kind of did work on them as well. Um, and some of those were like outside contractors, and some of them would have been like internal Falcom people, and like because not all of the ports were done by Falcom as well. Like um, because it's like I think like Sammy did the SNES version, wasn't it? And then like Hudson did some versions. So like there's a lot of inconsistencies out there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
Hudson I think did they did the TurboGrafx one because that's their
yeah,
um and yeah, Sammy did the SNES one. I think there were two companies involved with the SNES one. Yeah, because it was Sammy and also I can never remember their name, but the Jekyll and Hyde company. Um
oh yeah, you
yeah,
mentioned that. Yeah, I don't
yeah,
remember
yeah.
their name, but yeah, yeah, it's definitely a bit of a bit of a rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, oh
Um,
yes, very much so.
yeah,
So,
um,
something that's interesting about E's music to me as well, because of all the ports, is that it's a great, to me anyways, it's a great chance to, if you listen to the different soundtracks, different versions of the soundtrack, to find the vibes of the various sound chips
yeah,
of the systems they come out for, especially too because it's the composer can be a little oblique, so it's just like all you have is the vibes of the PC-88 version versus the Genesis version, and the Genesis version having, the classic kind of like crunchier, less tinny sound or whatever.
mm,
And I have done that less with since this soundtrack, but it is one of the most insane projects I've ever done, was to listen
Yeah,
to the Ease One soundtrack,
it's
like all in
definitely
a row, all the different ports, and sort of like it's really it can sound, when you don't listen to like a lot of video game music, to sort of like you're repeating it, but for sickos like us, it's so good to just be like, oh, listen, this has got the bass right, yeah. Like,
yeah, it's
yeah,
a rare opportunity that you have the same like song to listen to on all of this different hardware.
yeah,
I can't think of many other examples where there's just like a song that is in a game that is used across this many different pieces of sound hardware to have, like you
yeah,
said, basically it's like a showcase essentially of like what they can do. Except for
yeah.
the SNES one, because that's not what the SNES can do. It can do so much more.
Yeah, it's probably the weakest one in fairness, and yeah, it is a little bit disappointing because yeah, the SNES can do so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I still do love the trading village of Redmont. I think is still like pretty solid. Um,
yeah,
the uh, the Al- the second dungeon. It's always named something differently, but we listened to it previously. But that one on the SNES version is not good. It is not good.
yeah. I think it, it is such a cool thing to be able to do with these episodes, and I like coming back to these episodes where we're just sort of doing a bit of a survey of the different sound chips that were used. Like the original Ease 1 and 2 episode we did, I tried to sort of cover as many different sort of versions of it as possible, just to sort of to give an overview of the sort of the different sounds that you get from these chips. And it is a little bit disappointing that the Super Nintendo one is probably one of the most sort of bland ones, that really lacks a lot of punch. But yeah, there's a couple of tracks on it, that the Trading Village Redmond and the Seal Time, which I do have in the next block, which I do think sort of play a bit more to the strengths of that sound chip. But I think as well, because the original compositions were on like the PC-88, which is an FM synth. The other FM synth soundtracks, like the Genesis, sort of are able to capitalize on that a little bit better. So yeah, I suppose with that, we'll jump into the next block of tracks, which is just sort of a mishmash of different versions that I have here. So I have two tracks from the Sharp X68000 version. I have two tracks from the PC Engine version. Or sorry, I have two tracks from the Super Nintendo version, and then I have two tracks from the PC Engine version. So first two I have are Beat of Destruction, which is Galbalan's Island track. And then I have an X68000 exclusive track, actually, which was composed by Masaaki Kawai, which is just called Chop. Um, then I have from the Super Nintendo version, Trading Village of Redmont and Seal Time. And lastly, from the PC Engine version, we have The Boy Who Had Wings again and Frozen in Time. Which, yeah, so Frozen in Time and Sealed Time, I believe, are the same track.
Yeah.
because again, as I mentioned, a lot of these were sort of differently translated, depending on who was actually doing the translating. I feel I have to mention again. It's such a weird thing for me that like that whole like the turbo graphics and that early audio sound to me is just like one of my favorite eras of video game music. Despite the fact that I never owned a system that could actually play CDs until I owned a PS1 in like 2002 when I actually finally bought one. But for whatever reason, just that style of music, just of video game music, really just fills me with a weird sense of nostalgia. Even though I don't have any actual nostalgia from that era. It's weird.
No,
What were you
I
going to say,
totally
Reese? Sorry.
no, I totally get what you mean because even though like we were not putting down, but saying it's a little unfair the comparison between some of these tracks in the SNES version, but
Yeah,
still I hear the SNES, classic sort of sounds in there, and I'm still just like, oh,
yeah,
how nice! I remember this from all of my in childhood playing the SNES. That's still nice to hear it come out of that chip, that format.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to bring up real briefly, even though it's simply just because I've been watching it and it's great. But I've been watching Free Run, which is an anime about like an elf mage who is, the beginning of the series, they defeat the Demon King, and it's all this very kind of like slow paced reflection of the time that she spent adventuring, because when she was doing it she was totally checked out. She didn't really care. She doesn't she It's like she lives like, thousands of years and humans die in a blip, and so she's just like, yeah, okay, you're one of the other things that's just gonna die, whatever. And but she, certain anime things pull her heartstrings, and so there's this intense melancholy and nostalgia as she sifts through all of this old stuff that's happening. And like, one of the early episodes is the statue of like, the Adol of that series is ruined, so she has to fix the statue, and then she spends like a year looking for just the right flower to plant at its base. And I don't know, I think I am just very taken between the themes of that and how the RPG adventurer has become such a huge trope in a specific way. Like obviously, like we've always had sort of like in D&D for decades and decades, stuff like that, but sort of like the crystallizing of that into a narrative character. And I just can't help but reflect on the same sort of stuff we're doing, just sort of like sifting through these old tracks, listening to the trading village of Redmont theme like a second or third time, and having like a twinge of nostalgia for when I listened to it earlier in the podcast. Like it's just this music is so classically JRPG, and clearly has influenced so much going forward. Like I don't know, it's really compelling to me the way that you can kind of engage with these things to I y- I don't know, just frame your life, frame being 30 or 40 years old and just being a huge ass nerd because you love this stuff. um yeah, and so no real fine point to put on it except watch free run. But I think it is very fun whenever we do stuff like this, and it's just like there's so many touch tones of like consoles we've owned, or sort of like, oh, we were talking about sort of like a Switch version and how much you can play these games. You don't even need the text. You just how to play them. It's great.
Yeah, I that's like some of there's a couple of tracks that I probably still prefer the SNES version. Like technically it's obvious that they're not up to the same level as the other ones, but it's also the first version of the game that I played. So like that was my base understanding of all of these songs really. Um And so some of them are, they were just so far outclassed that you're kind of just like, yeah, all right, whatever. I don't need to listen to the SNES one anymore. But there are others where it's still like there's still something there, and that particular version of it still does something for me. So yeah, there's definitely something to that.
I think like the compositions themselves are strong regardless of like
Yeah, absolutely.
any issues you might have with the sound hardware or how that was implemented. So like it's if you're sort of coming to it from the Super Nintendo or one of the other versions that isn't sort of quite as good, it's nice to have the notion that like, well, there's only it's only the only way is up from here. Like
Yeah.
we're only getting better from this point onwards.
Yeah, I mean, it says something that, in the Oath of Felghana, they did give you the option to listen to the PC-88 or the Sharp X68000 version. And I usually do switch it to the to the PC-88 version. It's just so good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The only problem with it is that they use like the map theme um from like the original one where it's just like that looping like ba 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 just over and over and over again. There's a section in Oath of Felghana where that's just like the music that's playing, and the orchestral version, they did some more stuff to it so it's not quite as monotonous. But if you had the PC-88 one on, it's just like
It's
this.
just
It's brutal.
yeah.
It is brutal. I had to swap out for that one bit, but other than that, yeah, it's a delight.
Yeah, I suppose it's not really designed to be heard that way in the original game.
No, you're on that screen for 3 seconds at a time usually.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so the Genesis version then is they added some extra plot stuff to that. Is that right?
Oh,
They
I
changed messed around with the plot a bit in it and added some extra bits at the start, is what I understand from that.
I can't remember if it does. I know in one and two like all start differently depending on which version
Mm,
you're playing. Three, at least on the Genesis version, I'm pretty sure it starts the same way. The localizations are uh I mean, not completely different. It's the same base script, but they were all done independently. So the
yeah.
Genesis one definitely has the worst uh, of the localization, and so it definitely suffers a bit in the story and stuff because of that.
Oh,
Um, Ironically, the SNES one is probably the best localized one.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
which is
did
a little
mention that, yeah. So I
frustrating.
suppose
Yeah,
um, you like for anyone who isn't aware, Scott was recently on an episode of Retronauts talking about this game as well.
there's been a
So
lot of E3 in my life lately. It's great.
Hell yeah.
yeah. So I'm just remembering some anecdotes you mentioned from that, and I thought it was that the Genesis version had some like additional intro stuff that wasn't in the original version, but maybe I'm misremembering that now myself.
Yeah, I think that's the TurboGrafx one
Oh, maybe, yeah.
of the and also Oath of Felghana also adds some pretext to it.
Yeah.
Because in the SNES and Genesis one and I think the TurboGrafx one you get that like the scrolling pillars where Adol's just like running by with the like him giving his backstory or whatever, and then you just sort of appear at the town, and Dogi's like, "Hey, this is my town. I've heard there's problems," and that's basically it.
Fair
Both
enough.
of Felghana is like you and It has you and Dogi like traveling and talking and stuff, and then you bump into someone from the village, and there's a
Yeah.
bit like more pretext and stuff to it.
Yeah, I suppose it's filled out a little bit more. Yeah, that's sort of the version I played first, so that's what I more remember, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I was curious at what point that sort of got added into the story.
Yeah.
As I say, with all the different versions and all the different localizations and all the different companies actually with their fingers in this pie, um, it's sort of yeah, it can be hard to figure out that stuff, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose we'll jump on to the next block of tracks, which is just all from the Genesis version. Um, so I have, let me see here, one, two, three, four, five tracks from the Genesis version. As I mentioned, from what I can see, the compositions, or rather the arrangements for this one, were done by Noriyuki Iwadare. Who's probably most famous, I think, for like Grandia and Lunar. outside of this, and a couple of
Nice.
other games that have some very excellent soundtracks. So like, definitely a good pedigree. And as you mentioned, these are probably the sort of closest to the original PC-88 in terms of their the composition and arrangement. So they're definitely interesting to listen to. So from that, I've got Runes of Ilverns / Ilburns. I have Dark Trap, Valestein Castle, Trading Village of Redmont again, and Be Careful. you can really feel like the Genesis feels like such a good home for that soundtrack. Um, and like Noriyuki Uedara did a really good job of translating that over. And like it's still, because of it's all FM synth, it still has the same feeling, but it still has that unique Genesis quality to it in terms of like the bass and the synths that they actually use to sort of replicate that. I think that they've done a really, really good job on it.
Yeah, I mean the Genesis is usually not, you know, uh, considered the lesser when it comes to RPGs of that era, especially, you know, compared to the Super Nintendo.
Of course, yeah.
Just, I mean, just, you know, the Super Nintendo is just a powerhouse. You couldn't compete. But the stuff that Genesis did have, um, the soundtracks I think just stick out so much. This being one of them, other like the Fantasy Star games as well, being some other notable ones. But yeah, this game in particular just really like the shining star to me of what the Genesis hardware can do. I think like I almost like I love the Streets of Rage soundtracks and stuff as well. You know, very different kind of music, um, and I like it a lot. But I feel like it does so trying to do so much um, at once, especially with the game sounds and stuff going over it and all the voice samples going crazy. Um, but this it's just like the Genesis isn't usually known for like clean and just like, you know, clean, neat, and well put together sounds like this, or not well put together, but compared to the SNES, and it's just, yeah, it does. It's just great.
Yeah, and it doesn't have that sort of like that terrible grindy guitar sound that you get sometimes.
Yeah,
You know, like people rightly shit on a lot of Genesis stuff, and especially for stuff that wasn't originally composed for the Genesis.
yeah.
Just for having some terrible sounds in it. But yeah, they
I
did a
mean,
really, really good job on this one.
can always point to the Spider-Man that came out recently. The that one song is
Yeah,
I every time I listen to it, I cannot like just break into hysterical laughter. Um,
it's that comes up as
it's
like one of the worst tracks of all time, and I actually think it's fine. Like it's a little bit
it's just
silly.
shocking to me. It's
Yeah,
just so many samples at once, just
yeah,
like layered on top of each other.
yeah. But I do sort of like that like the Streets of Rage 3 sound as well, where it's just like um a sort of a beautiful cacophony that somebody's managed to wrangle out of this out of the sound chip. I do sort of appreciate that, even though I can definitely understand somebody who finds that really, really grating.
It's yeah, it just get it there's just so much going on that it just like feels like it gets messy sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you listen to the music isolated, um, you know, it's fantastic. But it's definitely more of like a maximalist approach to the Genesis sound hardware compared to
Yeah, there's a
something like
little bit more
Ys.
restraint
Yeah.
in this. Definitely, yeah. Yeah, so I suppose we should probably talk a little bit more about the remake. So we talked a little bit about it, but it is the version that I played first, so it's like the one that introduced me to the series. So I got it when it originally released on Steam. Um, and one of the really cool things about it, as you mentioned, is just that you can switch between soundtracks more or less on the fly, um, which is really, really cool. Just when I was first playing through it, because I was just like able to switch between them and sort of to compare and contrast and see how it sounded on the different versions. And they've done that for a couple of the other re-releases as well. I think the Ease 1 and 2 Chronicles release on Steam does the same. It lets you choose between a couple of different versions of the soundtrack. But I do actually really, really like the new arrangements on the on that, because it does feel like a little bit more modern. But I think, as you were saying before, right at the start when we were listening to the opening track, like it does feel a little bit cheaty to be able to just sort of take a track like that and just apply as much sort of modern music modern sounds to it, and have real instruments and things like that, where you're not sort of limited by the sound chips. Which I think is a fair thing to say, but I do just really really love how the Oath and Felghana soundtrack sounds.
Yeah, I think it's really nice. I mean, to go from, it's like an interesting exercise to listen to from like the PC-88 version progressively through the releases up to, Oath of Felghana, where it's essentially like orchestral audio. And you just see like, continuously how they can rethink the songs in different ways because of the new capabilities that they have available to them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun exercise that I'm ashamed to admit probably how much time I've spent doing that, but of just listening to like, oh, now I want to listen to this version of it.
And that's before you even get into like the different arranges that they do. Like, so that the opening track, I didn't actually mention it, is from the Ease 3 Super Arrange version. And I've got a track in the next block which is from the Ease 3 Special Arrange version. Which is just, yeah, they were busy boys and girls in the Falcom sound team, definitely in the 90s, with all the different versions you can get, and like a bunch of this is on Spotify as well, which is really really cool. So like you can just sort of dig in on just one game, and find so much different versions of all the soundtracks to actually listen to. It is a little bit daunting, but it's quite fun to just sort of to go through them and experience all the different versions that they've actually put together. And like you say, Scott, just just the way that different arrangers and composers have actually approached the same material is really really cool.
Yeah, it's a shame that, I mean, we've seen some of these people. I know a lot after these three, a lot of the people at Falcom left to go do different things. Some of them we've seen come up other places, but Meiko, I don't think she's ever done anything that I've seen after these three, which is, I mean, she do what she needs to do or whatever. But it's just such a shame because like the talent of and just the quality of these first three soundtracks is just so good.
Yeah,
it'd be great to hear
as
more
near as I
stuff.
can tell, she sort of stayed around with Falcom, but more as like a directorial role, like a
I
music
see.
director, rather than like doing lots and lots of compositions. Yeah, because like
Gotcha.
you can even see releases up here as like Dragon Slayer. Yeah, so some of these are re-releases as well. But looking at them, yeah, like there's a lot of stuff where she's been credited as like a music director and things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
That makes sense, of course. But
yeah,
yeah, she's just so good at her music's just so good.
absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I think we'll jump into the last block of tracks anyway. So for this, I have one track, as I mentioned, from the special arranged version. It's called Tearful Twilight. And then I have four tracks from the Oath and Felghana soundtrack. So again, composed by Meiko Ishikawa, and the arrangements were done by Yukihiro Jindo for all of these. So we've got The Boys Got Wings again, another version of this. It's sort of the bloody tears of this soundtrack. I think it just keeps coming back, and I will never get tired of it. Every time somebody does a new
Yeah,
version
it
of it, I'm just like, fuck yeah.
bangs harder every time because you're listening to it again.
It's
Yeah.
funny because Bloody Tears is another song that I'm like, I want to listen to this on all the different hardware.
I want to find the pachinko version of Bloody Tears and just listen to that.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be covering the pachinko.
Oh, don't worry, I've got a
Castlevania,
pachinko.
Oh, jeez.
Hell yes.
And then we have Raven Beast, Valestein Castle again, and Sealed Time, which is again same track as Frozen in Time from earlier on. that last one is such a fucking wild interpretation of the original track.
Yeah.
And I think that's like part of why I love the Oath of Felghana soundtrack in particular, is just like they're just not afraid to just take these original compositions and do something
Yeah.
absolutely fucking bonkers. Like the first track, like the Boys Got Wings, it's just like full of these transy synths and like the sort of classic, I suppose at this stage we call it classic, the Falcom violin solos that they loved using at this time. If you listen to soundtracks that they released around this time, there's a lot of sort of violin soloing going on. And like Raven Beast has got like break beats, and I'm pretty sure there's an Ammon break in there as well. And like Valestein Castle is just like like a prog rock epic with like shredding guitars and organ solos and shit. And like yeah, it's really cool to hear somebody just take these tracks that and do something really really sort of out there with some of them.
Uh, those banged so fucking hard. Oh my god, I was losing my mind. That was one I had not listened to. So, Jesus.
Yeah.
We're bringing back the post show CRT sound system hangout in the parking lot. Well, we're all gonna trade our drugs. We're not gonna say what we had, and we're just gonna do them, and we're gonna listen to it. From out of the trunk of my car. That ripped.
Yeah. Any thoughts on those, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, like you said, the interpretations are always it's interesting to hear how they take it. Going from something originally that was just sound hardwire trying to make its best interpreter impersonation of some of these instruments, um, to actually have you know full uncompressed quality audio like of real instruments playing the stuff is yeah, I mean, it's great. It's great to hear. Like a lot of a lot of times, like for old 8-bit music or whatever, when people want to listen to like a more modern version of, they have to find like some cover band or something like that
Yeah.
that's done like a good like a rock version or whatever of it. But for this game, like it's just there. It's just part of the actual soundtrack. You get it too.
Yeah. And again, it's really cool that they do include the original versions if that's more your speed as well.
Yeah.
Because like yeah, it's cool for in general. I think when you get re-releases and remakes and so on, that sort of that don't forget where they come from. Like I like any of those. Like you see a lot in recent remakes where you have like buttons that you can switch between like the original graphics and HD upscales and stuff like that. I always like to see them include sort of as much of the original in a remake as possible as well. Um, Even though if it might necessarily be a little bit more archaic or something like that, it's always nice to sort of see it. And I think both as a retro gamer, like you always want to see that as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of the remakes of games, Tomb Raider that just came out that has it.
Yeah,
One of the funniest ones I remember, the Diablo 2 remake, um, because the original game runs at something like 16 frames per second or something like that, some really weird slow number. And you
yeah.
can flip back and forth, and it's like flipping between like 20 and 120 like for frames per second. And it's just like such a dramatic shift. It's really funny.
Yeah. And again, like they didn't necessarily even need to do that, but it's cool that they
Yeah.
bothered to include it for the sickos that like to compare and contrast.
Yes,
for sure.
yes,
Which I think we definitely are in this podcast.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, any final thoughts on Ease 3 or the soundtracks or anything else, Scott?
No, it's just, I mean, I think it's what really ties like this whole game together. It's Ease 3 is a bit of a oddity, in
Mm,
terms of on its own, and especially in terms of the Ease series. And it's definitely got some real wonkiness to it. But the soundtrack sort of helps to push you through some of the more painful parts, I'll say, of the game, because there's always more music to see, and the music it's just enjoyable being in the game because of all the music and stuff that's playing.
yeah, absolutely. Reese, any other thoughts yourself?
Just that I think once again we proved our thesis about the majesty of different ports and sound chips through the prism of Ease 3, and just
Mhm.
how the different variants have really illustrated um just how much flex there is with these incredibly strong compositions, and how much it's
Mm,
still sort of like is still tethered to the game, still tethered to the vibe. It all of this still feels like ease, and it there are trends of the time that they were released that might sort of change things, but it's great. Like you could spend a week just on this one game soundtrack, and I think that's
yeah,
great. That's incredible, and part of why we do what we do here on the
absolutely. Yeah.
pod.
Yeah, so I suppose with that, we'll close out the episode. Scott, if you want to plug anything you've got going on, your Twitter, I know you have a website. You've a sort of an interesting website concept. I was reading, I was reading it the other day. I was like, that's a pretty cool idea to do. But I suppose you can explain that to the listeners.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a sort of pie in the sky dream that I'm slowly working on of like to reopen or recreate the idea of a video game rental shop. Um and provide that service to people. But yeah, you can find me. I'm more on. I've kind of left Twitter alone these days. I'm more on. You can find me on Blue Sky there. harrysvideogames.com or harrysvideogames.com is the website as well. So yeah, you can just find me on there. My YouTube's on there, and Twitch and everything is linkable
Yeah,
some way through that website, so you can find
yeah.
it.
I'll include a link in the show notes for definite. Yeah. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was really good. This is a soundtrack that I've wanted to do since basically day dot. So when you came to suggest it, I was like, yeah, absolutely, we're fucking doing this.
Oh yeah, no, thanks for
Absolutely.
having me. It's great. I
Yeah,
love talking about this game. It's
fantastic.
a favorite of mine. So of
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for bringing us this. It's
course, of
we
course.
cannot underscore enough how we're ease heads around here. So,
Yeah. Reese, what you got going on at the moment?
you can find me at Twitter at Reese V Writer. We're even the diehards are seemingly being driven to Blue Sky, so that I'm also there at Reese V Writer. I've changed my name, so it's you're just gonna have to deal with that emotionally. I also have another podcast called "Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth," where me and some like-minded compatriots are mentally ill about politics and video games leftistly. And I also have a little personal project called Existential Warfare that released a brand new episode about brewing beer, and my friend Matt, who is quite a talented beer brewer, and you should check that out. You can just type in Existential Warfare into whatever podcast thing you have. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, links for all that will be in the show notes as well. And as for ourselves, yeah, we're CRT Sound System. We can be found on Blue Sky mostly, CRT Sound System there. I still occasionally post on Twitter, but I've sort of delved into a little bit of shit posting as well, just because I'm going to shit post my way down with the ship on that website, I think.
Yeah.
Um, We've got a Patreon going at the moment, or still. Please subscribe so that I can get a Jamiroquai figurine.
You have to. It looks just like
It's too lifelike
jo-
for me to not to get it.
it looks exactly like John Jamiroquai.
I
So
think I've seen it actually. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty.
it's shockingly lifelike.
That's
Yeah, you can.
it's a sticker on our server. So
It is, yeah. And you can find that on patreon.com/CRT Sound System. Come and join our Discord. We like to chat about Jamiroquai and other music there. Or you can just chat whatever nonsense you want with us. If you
Mhm.
want to come on the podcast, let me know, or let Reese know, and we would absolutely love to have anybody on to talk about whatever silly game soundtrack they love.
Absolutely, come on the podcast. That's an order.
So the last track we've got is another version of "The Boy Who Had Wings." from the E3 J.D.K special version. And again, I'm never going to get tired of different versions of this song. So some people might say that 4 different versions of the song in one episode is excessive, and those people would be wrong.